Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Weekly Roundup. I'm Karsten Melton, and let's jump straight into today's episode. Here's our stardoms for week number 2. And we'll start with New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley. Is he back? Possibly. Week 1 showed the return of the old Saquon that we all know, rushing for 164 yards and 1 touchdown, scoring a staggering 33 fantasy points. While it may be too early to tell if he truly is back, a really favorable matchup against Carolina in Week 2 could mean another big-time performance. Next up is Buffalo Bills wide receiver Gabe Davis. First, he balled out in the AFC divisional round versus Kansas City. Then, he continued his hot form on opening night against the Rams. Is Gabe Davis becoming the real deal? It certainly seems so. He's a perfect complement to Stephon Diggs and has been lights out so far. This week is a Monday night showdown hosting Tennessee, a Titans team last year that allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers outside of the Minnesota Vikings. Because of course my Vikings were the worst. Of course. Anyways, expect Diggs, Josh Allen, and Gabe Davis to gain major fantasy points this week. And finally, an unorthodox choice. Let's go with the Cincinnati Bengals defense. This one's pretty simple. Cincy plays Dallas this week. A Dallas team that just lost Dak Prescott for multiple weeks. A Dallas team that will have Cooper Rush under center. And a Dallas team that even with Dak at QB looked very pedestrian. The Bengals nearly forced a win in Week 1 versus Pittsburgh because of that defense. Expect them to be even better this week. Now, let's take a look at our bench for this week. And let's start with Miami Dolphins tight end Mike Gesicki. Miami looked great against the Patriots, but Gesicki was nowhere to be found. Only 1 catch for 1 yard. Now this offense runs through Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and that's if Tua can get them the ball consistently. Baltimore may not be the greatest defense ever, but with how low Gesicki's production is, definitely stay away for week number 2. Next is Los Angeles Rams running back Cam Akers. I feel like this doesn't really need much explanation. Just watch back the Rams Week 1 game against Buffalo. 3 carries, 0 yards. 0. Yes, this week they play Atlanta, who yet again, Atlanta then blew a 16-point lead against New Orleans, but after that Week 1 showing, it's not worth the risk to start him yet. Now, if he shows consistency again as a good back, then you can consider him for a starting spot. Lastly, we have either of the Dallas Cowboys running backs, Ezekiel, Elliott, and Tony Pollard. We are much lower on these two than most people, it seems, but as we just gave the Bengals defense as a stardom, it makes sense to have these two as a bench'em for us. Why is that? Well, it's simple. Cincy will make Cooper Rush beat him through the air. If he can, hats off to him. But Zeke and Pollard are not going to be the ones to sink the Bengals this week, especially after their lackluster performances in Week 1 against Tampa. All in all, it's just not a great matchup here timing-wise. And now let's end with our weekly waiver wire. First up is Indianapolis Colts quarterback Matt Ryan. Yes, Indy tied with the Texans. Now that's hilarious and depressing, we get it. But Matty Ice looked pretty solid. And this week is a matchup against Jacksonville. He's a solid backup choice for now, but should the old MVP version of Matt return, watch out. Next up is our very own Jalen Warren. The Pittsburgh Steelers rookie already is the number 2 option in the Steel City behind Najee Harris. But with Harris potentially out for a bit, Warren looks to become the feature back. And with 3 straight favorable matchups against New England, Cleveland, and the Jets, Jalen could pop off and have some big-time performances filling in. And finally, let's throw in Tampa Bay wide receiver Julio Jones. That's still weird to say. The former Falcon and Titan had a phenomenal game in Dallas. 3 catches for 69 yards, nice, and 17 rushing yards. If Chris Godwin can't go against the Saints, Julio's production will continue to increase with Tom Brady at QB. Julio could be someone that can come off your bench and possibly be a consistent starter. But putting him on your bench to wait and see is a wise option for now. And that's it for this week's edition of the Fantasy Football Weekly Roundup. Be sure to tune in next week for more fantasy advice from us. And enjoy Week 2. Hopefully it's just as chaotic as Week 1 was. For the Daily O, I'm Karsten Melton.